Welcome to Homeschool Life. I'm Jonathan,
And I'm Adriana.
and today we're going to have a little bit of conversation. It was inspired by a previous conversation we had about how to take a textbook
Or any abstract information,
or a
right?
curriculum or something like this and turn it into a lesson.
Something concrete and more palatable to a child.
Because one of the things that a lot of you out there, you may have a favorite textbook that you remember in high school or something like this, and you found it either in the library or you have it yourself, and you're going, I remember learning from this, and I want to use it in homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is you may try, start reading it to your kid. Maybe the kid is about 10 years old or something like this, and it's not working. They're not interested.
Right. Well, first tell them what you brought home. I want the
Oh, yeah.
audience to figure out how we got into this conversation in the first place that we want to actually share with you. And Jonathan basically brought a book. Is it a book that you brought home, or did you have this already?
It was a book I bought in the library that not too long ago. It's Western Civilizations. It was an older textbook from 1988, and it reminded me of a textbook I used in high school. And
yeah.
it's really good. And I thought it's got things separated into chapters.
It appealed to you
Yeah,
because
very
you're like
much.
you were like, this has really great information that you really want to present it to our daughter, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's still like chapter 2, some Mesopotamian civilizations. Chapter 3 is Egyptian civilizations. 4 is early Greek civilizations, and it goes on from there, and then it goes to the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome, the Middle Ages, and I was like, this is a fantastic resource.
Who do you think that book was written for?
It was written for like high school.
High school. So that comes to show you that you can actually get a high school. Actually, I recommend that you get a more advanced book, high school or college level, because eventually that's the goal that I think they're wanting kids to learn as far as academics,
But
of course you can't present it in that format.
no, and that's the thing. I mean, it's like, okay, I know a lot of you may be like stumped. I've got these resources. My shelf is packed with books, and how do I get this
A homeschool environment.
to a homeschool environment to my 8-year-old or 10-year-old or whatever?
Yeah, because you don't want to again copy the same thing that was done in traditional school system where they relied heavily on memorization.
Or you don't want to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars trying to get these turnkey systems that may or may not work.
Yeah, because the thing is, your child may not naturally appeal to this particular subject. And today we're just going to discuss history as an example.
Right.
Because it's a good place to start, because everything has history with it. So we thought it would be advantageous for us to discuss history first, and then we can always reference it.
Yeah, and to be clear, you can kind of use this idea and notion of turning resources like this into lessons and you'll understand that more as we go through the process.
And I want to make sure what we're trying to do is turn it into something that's more palatable and interesting to a child.
Right. So I'm gonna play a part as if I'm a parent trying to do this, and Adriana is going to give me instructions on how that works.
Right. So again, the thing is, if you look at the stages of development, you kind of gauge that children have a very immature brain. You can't assume, that you shouldn't assume, that they can take the information just like an adult does, which an adult has a much mature brain and they can handle abstract information.
Right.
So, and actually, there might be some middle schoolers and high schoolers who didn't have the opportunity to learn this information concretely, and so you can tell when they're not interested in a subject. You're like, oh, well, I'm not really interested in that. So it's a lot of information. It's overwhelming. Not really interested in learning about it.
I mean, who wants to have lessons about Babylon and ancient Assyria and all this other stuff?
Right. And so then there are going to be the few kids who really love this subject, and they're going to naturally gravitate it. towards it. Let's give them an example with our daughter Annabelle. She gravitates a lot towards physics and chemistry, and
Right.
we didn't really have to do much because she can actually take the abstract form of those things and by herself learn from them. So
Right.
she can actually grab textbooks in their abstract form and go full swing with it and
Right.
learn about multiverses or whatever that I don't think I even know. I didn't even have to master that to teach her. She just took off on her own. So those subjects, we didn't really have to do much of conversion to concrete. But other subjects that she's not naturally inclined to absorb that way, we need to present it in a more concrete form, more appealing. And some high schoolers may need that too because, like I said, they didn't have that concrete aspect. So they may need that now as a starter.
Sure.
Okay. But the advantage is because a high schooler has a more mature brain, they're going to learn faster. So what you're going to notice is even if you incorporate the concrete things, they're going to pick it a lot faster than a younger child in the lower elementary stage, obviously. But the concrete materials are really good. So
anyway, I've got this book.
So you got this book, and so you need to make it palatable. So,
well, I mean, I can read it. I mean, they've got the chapters here, you know, and it says, let's see, chapter 1, the earliest beginnings, the nature of history,
right,
early Homo sapiens, you know, etc. And I can just read this. What's wrong with that?
oh, when you read it, it's really really blah and not very appealing for a small child, right? It's kind of like they're gonna zone out. And their
Right.
attention span is not there because remember about the attention span on these lessons for small kids is not a long duration. Okay, 15 minutes tops. I think I don't have the chart with me, but you can go back to the other podcast that talks about this, how much time they can handle
Right.
to actually
Well, what if I make them short, like a really short thing?
well
I just take one thing and what about that?
well you can, but let me actually present it this way.
Okay.
And this is to present something. The best way for history is tell it as a storytelling.
Okay.
So you have something and I mean, there's books in the library that already have the storytelling format. They tell about the story of Alexander the Great, for example. And they have this whole thing in story format that is kids want to read that.
Okay.
So, and you had mentioned about that this has been used over the years, the storytelling.
Oh yeah. It's like even before we recorded history and writing, we had oral tradition.
Right.
Okay, and so in oral tradition, they'd get around the campfire and they'd tell stories about what happened to their ancestors and great heroes and stuff like this, and that was their entertainment. So the person who told these stories, they had to be really good. Okay, so it would be remembered.
Right.
And so, and also, they write them in that before writing, they tell them in a poetic or dramatic sense, so that the next generations will remember these.
Exactly.
And so that's time after time after time, they were able to remember
that history.
the history, and
Exactly.
and they never had tests.
Exactly. And this is a good example is why Greek mythology appeals to kids so much, because it's told in story format.
Okay.
So, and it's very interesting stories.
So okay, so I'm gonna tell like a story, but the story's kind of already written here in the book.
Well, you're gonna have to make it interesting for a small child to want to listen to you.
Okay. How does Montessori do it? Do they have what do they use anything like visual aids, or what do they do?
Well, first of all, we're talking about the presentation first. We'll talk about the independent stuff later.
Okay.
Okay, when you present it for the first time, I want to share something with you.
Right.
Okay, you tell it as a story.
Okay.
That's how because you're supposed to pique their interest on that particular thing that you're trying to present.
Okay, I get you now.
Okay, now you might have a different way to make, like, say there's an older child, okay, upper elementary, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, whatever, you may want to, another option would be having, for example, a timeline set out on the whiteboard, okay? And you have to make it interesting, that the child is engaged and say, wow, I really want to learn this. This is fun, the way we're learning it right now.
Right.
So the thing is, you may have major events that happened, okay?
Mm-hmm.
For example, Sumerian, the development of their 12th month calendar, okay? You have a magnet that says the 12th month calendar, how that was developed, and it has a little something that goes with that they can place on the timeline on your board.
How they domesticated grain.
That's another magnet right there. So you kind of do something that's interactive. The first time you present it, you have it there, but what that does is later, when they want to brush up on it, they can independently place those things themselves.
So if I have it like on a magnetic board, I can like take these pictures of, like, say, like here's Sumeria, right? And then I have underneath, what did they, how did they dress? Or...
Well, you can have, like, for the pictures, like the cuneiform, for example, you have a little picture what that looks like. This development, this they found the cuneiform, whatever they think it was, started at this particular time. Okay.
Right.
For the events, you don't have to have pictures. Just have what the event is called. Okay.
Right.
Some battle or something that happened, and then a little description of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what that does is it makes your presentation much more fun, more engaging. They can see, they can stand up and help you put the magnet on there. So you want to create a more
What about a map?
Also, I mean, you can use these visual aids too. And the thing is, after the fact, and this is your wow factor. Your presentation has to be really appealing. This is your first attempt to introduce something that you think is valuable to know and is exciting and interesting. And it's your introduction for the purpose of piquing their interest. This is not dull information anymore.
So,
okay?
So should I reference the book when I'm doing this?
Well, no, the book is a resource in itself, but it's an abstract form. You can have it on your bookshelf, but it's going to be a while for that child when they're older, maybe high school, maybe college age, to want to grab that book. But right now, it's not palatable.
So you want to keep everything concrete as if we're doing like oral tradition, right?
Right.
Like
you have your story. You can,
Got it.
You can use the timeline that way. And the thing is, you don't want to dig in too deep either, because remember, attention span of a kid is not very long. So you want to make a really awesome presentation. Keep it on the surface. Just mention some big things, okay? And so once that kid is like, oh wow, that sounds really like interesting. Okay, is there more, right? But you don't have to make it up. It's not up to you now to actually present them more. You can provide resources and materials for them to independently look into more. Okay, well, anything that it's in depth, try to make it in a form for them to independently look at that.
Well, I liked this book when I picked it up. I liked it because the thing is I started looking online and through YouTube videos and stuff like this, and they really didn't have really good resources, or they had resources that, I remember how they taught me about Western civilization, and now you see a lot of different resources, and they kind of changed they
cut off some things and added some things, and not everyone is happy about that. And so this is good that you brought that up. This is why, if you have an old textbook or an old book or whatever, and you think this is like superior to the other resources that they have now that don't really cover it. Good point. So that's why this is good, useful information for you to be able to convert that to something you can present to a child. So
I can use the really good materials and be able to extrapolate concrete lessons then. Okay. And I guess the way I do it and the way I present it is like they did before when we had oral tradition, before we had writing, so that they would remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'm following now. I'm following.
Right. So let's see.
But
Looking back to this book that you have,
yeah.
what is the chronological order? Let's see what the chapters are. Is the first one Babylonian or how far?
Well, actually, the first chapter talks about like the earliest beginnings of natural history and stuff like this, and the dawn of history.
Okay. Well,
And
let's go to the table of
sure,
contents.
sure.
So basically, your books are going to come in chronological order. So there's your
Right.
timeline right there.
So really, it's you have part one, the dawn of history, which covers the earliest beginnings, Mesopotamian civilization, Egyptian civilization, Hebrew and Greek civilizations. Part two is classical civilizations.
There you go, which is
Greek
with
and
the
Rome.
Greek and Rome and so on.
Part three is the Middle
Okay.
Ages.
Stop right there. That's
Okay.
good enough for them to have an idea of how that's broken down by every civilization.
It's
Earlier to classical and to modern, basically.
yes, and that's why I like it, because it's like precisely the old way of presenting the information.
right.
But the thing is we have, even though this is great, it's abstract.
It's abstract, and not only that, but in the traditional school system, there's only 1 year where this gets presented.
yeah.
So there's the one and only opportunity that child, whatever that grade level may be, gets to have that information presented once, that 1 year. After that, they've moved on to other things.
That's why they forget it.
And that's why it's not absorbed, because what if a kid wasn't ready for it, right?
Right.
And so and one of the things is why I like Montessori, and it's more universally applicable. How they approach it is they have something like history, right? Like this, but they break it down into 3 years. Okay?
Okay.
And what that does is you present it the first year, but not the whole information, just whatever is palatable for that kid at that age, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second year is they review what they learned on the first year, and then they present a little bit of new information.
Right.
Okay, so they had a chance to review the previous year and learn a little bit more. So if it didn't interest them the first year, it might click with them the second year. Okay, then the third year they get everything from the previous 2 years plus a little bit new information. So they have 3 years to go to review the material and learn something new. And so that's why it clicks, because they have 3 chances
Right.
to have this information presented
and
to them.
three chances of very interesting information.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it makes sense. So they have many chances.
Now you mentioned last time in their run-up conversation about how they can use the material that you've created for the lessons, and they can manipulate them themselves.
Yeah, okay. So we talked about the presentation, right? Aspect when you present it for the first time. Now comes the concrete part, the thing that they're going to manipulate independently. Okay,
Yeah.
without needing you to be there. So you could use that as part of the presentation, sure. But the whole thing is that concrete material is for them to manipulate by themselves, to look at. This is them brushing up on the information, okay, because it's an interesting format. It's not a textbook. Could be something like, let me give you an example. What Montessori does is they use what they call 3-part cards. Okay, they create cards. We can, as an example, like flashcards maybe, but it's even better than flashcards, and it's self-correction. So
What does one of them look like?
Okay, so it depends. It changes in lower elementary to upper elementary. Changes, actually. For lower elementary, all it has is a picture of what it is, okay, and a label of what it's called.
Like, for the example you gave was like in medieval times.
Yeah, like clothing. What is clothing in medieval times? So you have a picture of medieval clothing and say this is medieval. Okay,
Right.
This belongs with that. So you have a card with the label. Now, the other part of it is you have the picture with the label cut off. And so what that makes them be able to correct themselves. They're trying to do like a game. They have the
Right.
picture with the label. Oh, this is Greek clothing. This is Roman clothing, whatever. So they're able to match it up, and they have the other card that's already with the label on it to check themselves.
Right.
So they have things that facilitate self-correction.
I see.
So they don't need you anymore, basically. They can learn that over and over without having to disturb you or you having to teach them.
Sure.
So that's what I mean by concrete materials. Maybe there's a map. Okay, I know this comes into geography, but there's puzzle maps. If there might be an old map of what it looked like at that time, how the territories were split. What, Egyptian times?
Yeah.
Egypt looked very differently.
What about like a map of battles?
That too. Maybe you can have something with little soldiers on it and discuss that particular time's strategies.
Right.
How they fought at that time.
And never get involved in a land war in Asia.
So that's what I mean, that having concrete materials that are fun. You can have a lesson on battles and have, this is the battle of whatever. Have the two sides and have little people and oh my God, the tube. Oh gosh, I almost forgot. There's this concrete material that you can buy at the craft stores or online. It's called the tubes, TOOB, and they have little people from different civilizations, and so you can buy that and present it on a map or whatever, and then have that as part of your concrete things on the side, and the kids are gonna want to manipulate and play with those, whatever.
Oh, sure.
So that's what I mean by concrete materials, things that they can keep referring to while they're learning.
Right.
Okay.
Well, there's also, I remember with Annabelle, she got involved in Greek mythology from, strangely enough, the Percy Jackson books.
That's the storytelling. That's what I'm saying. It's brought a subject and told it in a way that is entertaining.
But what I find this interesting is because I know a lot about Greek mythology. The thing about it is even though she read those books, I started asking her very specific, factual things about Greek mythology, and she was able to answer and give names and things like that from the fiction of Percy Jackson.
Right.
And I was actually quite surprised that this. It's like most people like pass right by that. No, that's not history. But for our daughter, it taught her history because her main strength is reading, and she loves the stories. And
so you can, in other words, you can have nonfiction into fiction and back and forth.
Right.
Some kids might read the fiction first and be like interested in the nonfiction, and then some kids will start with the nonfiction and get interested in the fiction. It doesn't matter. Whatever appeals to the kid that they find interesting, that's the point. You want them to naturally want to read that and learn that. That's what we're saying. So now that we said that, I would also recommend having an area in your house that you can call it a prepared environment. You have a shelf and you have these things on there, these concrete materials. You have some books like for younger kids that they want to read and pull out and say, oh, I want to read this book. It was really fun to read. And whatever other.
And these manipulatives you talked about.
Yeah, these concrete materials, you have it there. Whatever you use to do your presentation, have that available too if you can. Another thing is some visuals. If your kid is a visual type of person, you may want to have a chart or anything, but make it available. Put it in that shelf so that they can grab it and look at it. That's how you do things so that they can be independent with. And
we also, just to recap, we can also do this with if we've already purchased a curriculum,
right, and it's not working or it's not palatable, you can also convert it to make
you don't have to necessarily scrap it,
right,
but you can actually utilize that as a resource,
right,
to and recreate it.
Exactly. You can reinvent it, because the thing about homeschooling is you want to make things appealing to your child is a unique type of learning.
Right.
Okay, if you know your kid is not going to be interested in this, but you know that they're going to like it if you do it that way, do it that way.
Right.
Okay, you are the best, you should be the best guide possible for your child. Your child's going to want to say, you're the best teacher ever, and I love learning from you.
Oh, yeah.
All these subjects that would otherwise be blah and like, not want to learn, you mom or dad, you make it to where I want to learn it because it's more interesting when you do it.
Okay, so I think I've got the whole thing grasped, so I'm gonna come out of my my questioning parent role here, and so let's go ahead and wrap it up. Is there anything more?
No, I think that's great. The storytelling and making concrete materials for your kids is gonna be a wonderful thing. For history, for example, we'll tackle the other subjects as well, but for history, this is what we recommend, and I think is gonna really help you cover those subjects.
You know, it's and you know, to be frank, one of the things that really made it clear for me is the fact that I remember about oral tradition, okay, and about in prehistory before it was written down, that they used to narrate these stories, and history was a story, and it was remembered and told around campfires of, you know, heroes and their ancestors and all these other things, and this was the entertainment. And that, to me, I got a visual in my mind as like, I know how to teach now.
Yes, and that's the thing is, if you're excited and interested in this way that you want to give it to your child is gonna do the same.
But that was my aha moment.
Right.
Okay, is when that happened, and so you know, that's all I really want to say.
Right.
Anything else to add?
No, that's it.
Well, thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it.
Make sure you visit our website.
Visit our website,
homeschoollife.net.
homeschoollife.net. And if you get a chance, we could really appreciate any sort of donations that you may have, or if you want to book a session with us to have a conversation about.
Or subscribe to our newsletter.
And absolutely subscribe to the newsletter. We've got some new stuff coming up. And so thank you very much. Have a good evening or day or whatever.
Yes. Until next time. See
Yes.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.